Hey, I'm Evan. I'm 25, just moved into this small house on the edge of town. It's nothing fancy, just a two-bedroom with creaky floors, a patchy lawn, and a water heater that complains every time I shower. But it's mine. After years of bouncing between shared apartments and moving for work, this place feels like, I don't know, a reset. I took a new job with shorter hours, hoping I'd finally have time to breathe. Maybe start writing music again. Maybe make a life that didn't feel like a layover. I'd been living here for about 2 weeks. Most of the boxes were still unpacked. I'd been living off frozen meals and takeout. My evenings mostly silent except for the occasional hum of the fridge and the late-night bark of someone's dog. Not lonely, exactly. Just empty in that way you only notice when things get too quiet. Then one evening, while I was heating up a sad-looking pizza, someone knocked on my door. Not lightly either. 3 short knocks, confident. I opened it, and there she was, Rachel Whitmore, from next door. She looked maybe early 40s, though her eyes had this spark, like she knew things the rest of us didn't. She wore a loose olive sweater and black leggings, her hair tied back casually, but still somehow perfect. She smiled in this way that felt practiced and real all at once. "Hi," she said, like she already knew me. "I'm Rachel. Sorry to barge in, but I've got a raccoon situation in my basement. My husband's out of town, and, well, I could use a hand." I said yes before I even thought about it. She led me through the yard gate into her house. It smelled like cinnamon and pine, lived in and clean, but not sterile. There were family photos on the hallway wall, her with a man I assumed was her husband, and a girl who looked college-aged. "That's Lily," she said, catching my glance. "Our daughter. She's away at school." We reached the basement door, and I followed her down the wooden steps. The lights flickered. "He's been hiding behind the water heater," she whispered, like the raccoon might be listening. I spotted it right away. He wasn't aggressive, just scared and cornered. I managed to guide him out with a broom and a little luck. He scurried off toward the woods behind her house. When I turned back to her, Rachel clapped her hands once, smiling wide. "You, my friend, have just earned yourself a home-cooked meal." I laughed. "You don't have to do that." "I know," she said, "but I want to." And that was the first time I really noticed the way she looked at me, just a second too long. Not inappropriate, not flirty, just intentional. And I felt it too. Something I didn't want to name. We stood in the basement a moment longer, neither of us moving. Then she said, "You like lasagna?" That's how it started. A raccoon and a plate of lasagna. The lasagna was incredible, by the way. We ate in her kitchen, the light over the table dimmed just enough to make everything feel closer. Her dog, an old golden retriever named Max, lay at her feet the whole time. Rachel talked easily about books, travel, the town. I mostly listened, nodding, chiming in when I had something to say. It wasn't awkward. It was warm. Familiar, almost. Her husband, Daniel, came up in passing. "He's in Dallas this week. Work's been nonstop lately," she said, sipping her wine. "I'm used to it." I nodded like I understood. I didn't. Not really. She asked about me, why I moved here, if I liked the neighborhood, what I did for work. I told her I managed logistics for a small firm and was hoping this place would be quieter. She smiled. "I think you'll find it's quiet in all the right ways. Sometimes too quiet." We left it there. Over the next few weeks, we kept running into each other. At first, it seemed like coincidence. She'd be watering her garden when I was pulling out of the driveway, or I'd be out back patching the fence, and she'd appear with a pitcher of lemonade. Always warm, always relaxed. But there was something in the way she looked at me, like she saw more than she said. One day, I was hauling boxes up to the attic when she called over the fence. "You look like you could use an extra pair of hands." She was in jeans and a loose t-shirt, hair in a messy bun, no makeup. She looked real. Beautiful in that way someone is when they're not trying to be. She helped me carry a few things, and we ended up sitting in the attic on an old couch the previous owner had left behind. Sunlight filtered through the dusty window, and she laughed when I sneezed from the dust. I laughed too. Then we were quiet again. "This used to be my favorite place in our old house," she said. "The attic. It always felt like a secret room." I said, "Maybe that's why it's nice." We didn't talk about the way our legs touched, or how I noticed her hand resting near mine, unmoving. We didn't talk about how still the air felt. Another time, she asked for help fixing her garage shelf. I spent 2 hours in there with her while she sorted through storage bins, stopping now and then to reminisce about things from her daughter's childhood. At one point, she pulled out a pink bike helmet and smiled at it for a long moment. She used to ride circles around this whole street, she said quietly. Later, she cooked dinner again. A roast this time. We ate in silence for most of it, save for the sound of forks against plates. After dinner, we sat on her porch swing. It had gotten chilly, and she brought out a blanket, draped it over our laps like it was the most natural thing in the world. I felt her shoulder brush mine, just slightly. Neither of us moved away. I started finding myself waiting for the next time, looking for excuses, offering to mow her lawn, asking if she needed anything from town when I ran errands. She never said no. One night, she asked me inside while I was coming back from a walk. Just got back from the store, she said, and I accidentally bought 2 of everything. I smiled. Accidentally? She shrugged. Let's not overthink it. That night, the air between us was thick. Her hand brushed mine twice when we reached for the same bowl. She didn't pull away the second time. When I left, she stood in the doorway and said, "Thanks for coming." I wanted to say something back, something that explained what this felt like. But I couldn't. So I said, "Anytime." Her eyes lingered a second longer than necessary. Then she closed the door. It was a Saturday. Overcast, mild breeze, the kind of day where time feels slower. Rachel asked if I could help her trim some ivy growing wild along the back fence. I said yes without even pretending to hesitate. We spent most of the afternoon working side by side. She wore old jeans, a navy flannel shirt over a tank top, gardening gloves. Her hair kept falling in her face, and she'd blow it away with this quiet little puff of air. I don't know why, but that stuck with me. I tried to stay focused, clipping vines, bagging leaves, but I kept watching her. The way she moved, calm and steady, like she'd done this 100 times before. At one point, she laughed at something I said, something stupid about the ivy being too aggressive for its own good, and it felt like a reward. Like I'd unlocked some tiny secret. We finished around 4. She offered lemonade, and I followed her inside. Her kitchen was warm, like always. She poured 2 glasses and leaned against the counter, sipping slowly. "That backyard's going to look amazing when it's all cleaned up," I said. She smiled, soft. "You've been a lot of help around here." I shrugged. "Happy to." That's when she set her glass down and looked at me differently, not just grateful. Present. Focused. The silence stretched, but it didn't feel uncomfortable. Just charged. "I keep thinking about what you said the other day," she murmured. "What did I say?" "That I shouldn't overthink things." I smiled, unsure of where this was going. "It's good advice." She stepped closer, not much, just enough to close some of the space between us. "You know," she said, almost under her breath, "I haven't felt this alive in a long time." Then came the pause. That moment where you both know something's about to happen, and you're trying to decide whether to stop it or let it in. We didn't stop. She reached up to brush a leaf out of my hair slowly, deliberately. Her fingers lingered near my temple. I don't know if I leaned in or she did. Maybe both. But we kissed. Gentle at first. Then again, deeper. I remember the feeling of her hand cupping the side of my neck, warm and steady. I remember thinking, this shouldn't be happening. And then thinking, but it is. When we pulled apart, neither of us spoke for a long moment. She looked down. "This is wrong." I nodded. "I know." She looked back at me. "But I don't want to undo it." We sat down on the living room couch, both holding our glasses like they might break. No more kissing, no touching. Just quiet. The air between us felt heavier, but not in a bad way. Eventually, she said, "Daniel's back on Monday. Just for a day, then gone again." I didn't know what to say. I just nodded. "I'm not asking you for anything," she added. I wanted to feel something again. You're not the only one." That was the first time we kissed. And once that door opened, it didn't close. The next evening, I found a note on my doorstep, folded in half, tucked under a small rock. It just said, "He's under the mat. Daniel leaves tomorrow morning. If you want to stop by." I must have read that note 20 times before sliding it into my pocket. I told myself I wouldn't go, that it was too much, too fast. But the next night, I found myself on her porch, staring at the doormat. That first time I used the key, I hesitated. My hand was shaking a little, ridiculous as that sounds. I stood there for a good minute, heart thudding in my chest, the sound of birds and a distant lawn mower filling the quiet. Then I bent down, lifted the mat, and found it. Small, ordinary, silver. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The house was quiet. Dim, like she'd lit it just for this. I could smell something, vanilla candles, maybe. Something warm. Rachel stepped into view from the hallway. She wore a soft gray sweater that fell to her thighs and nothing else that I could see. Her hair was loose. She looked different, still her, but softer, like she'd taken something off besides her clothes. She didn't speak right away, just smiled, walked over, and hugged me. That first night wasn't loud or wild. It was quiet, slow, a series of deep breaths after holding them in too long. We sat on her couch for a while, just talking about old movies, her daughter Lily, my job. She told me she used to teach art classes before Lily was born. I miss that version of myself, she said, the one that created things. I said, maybe she's still there. She smiled, sad and sweet. You make it easier to believe that. After that night, it became a pattern. A routine, almost. When Daniel left, she'd let me know. Sometimes it was just a glance across the yard. Sometimes a folded note in my mailbox, always signed R. And sometimes she'd text something simple like, "Need help in the garden?" I started coming over more. Always quietly. Always alone. She'd leave the door unlocked, or the key where I could find it. We didn't need to say much. Her house became a kind of sanctuary. Dim lamps, low music, shared dinners in the kitchen. We kissed like we were making up for lost time. We held each other like it mattered more than we could admit. But it wasn't just the physical part. There were nights we didn't even touch, just sat on the couch under the same blanket, sipping wine and watching some old movie from the 60s. Sometimes she'd rest her head on my shoulder. Sometimes I'd talk about my dad, or the friend who stopped answering my texts after I moved. And she'd just listen. That meant more than I thought it would. There was one evening midweek, rainy. She made stew. We sat at her dining table, candles flickering, the rain soft against the windows. She reached across the table and touched my hand. You feel like a person I would have known in another life. I looked at her, really looked. What about this life? She didn't answer right away. Then she said, "This one's complicated." We never talked about love. We didn't use words like that. I think we both knew it was dangerous to even come close. But there was something full about the way she looked at me when I left her house. Something that made it hard to breathe. Then Daniel started coming home more often. Not every day, but more than before. Business trips got shorter. Sometimes canceled. Once, his car was still in the driveway when I drove past on a Sunday. My stomach dropped. After that, things changed. She started texting less. No more notes. No more late-night visits. We still saw each other, briefly, in the yard, exchanging small talk about weather or plants, but nothing more. Her eyes never lingered anymore. And just like that, it started slipping away. The change wasn't sudden, but it felt like a door slowly closing. Quietly, without a slam. I kept waiting for a sign, some message, a knock on my door, even just a glance that lasted a second too long. But it didn't come. Not that week. Not the one after. I told myself she was just being careful, that maybe Daniel had gotten suspicious. But even when he was away again, the silence stayed. One Saturday afternoon, I saw her in the driveway. She was unloading groceries. I stepped outside, made like I was checking the mail. She looked up, smiled. But it was polite, distant. Like everything we'd shared had folded itself into a box and been stored away. "Hey," I said. "Hey, Evan," she replied, her voice light. "Nice day, huh?" "Yeah. Finally some sun." She nodded. "Hope your week's been good." And that was it. No mention of us. No flicker of anything behind her eyes. Just small talk. I stood there after she went inside, mailbox still open, empty. I didn't move for a while. That week, I stopped walking past her house. I avoided the back fence. I even turned down my porch light at night like that would make her absence easier to ignore. It didn't. One night, I sat on my kitchen floor with the fridge open, drinking water straight from the jug. I stared at the tiles and thought about that first time we kissed. About the way her voice dipped when she said my name. About the quiet hush in her house when it was just us. I missed that silence. Eventually, I stopped waiting. I threw myself into work. Started driving into town more often. Volunteered to take on more shifts at the garage. Told myself maybe I should move. Colorado, maybe. Or Montana. Somewhere quieter. Somewhere new. I didn't talk to anyone about what happened. There wasn't anyone who would have understood. Not really. And besides, what could I even say? I fell for a woman who was never really mine. And I think she felt the same. Until she didn't. Weeks turned into months. Spring faded into the slow burn of summer. Her yard bloomed. Roses, hydrangeas, some kind of wild lavender near the back fence. I'd see her out there sometimes, in the early evening, watering the plants. We never spoke. Once, I almost waved. But she didn't look up. And then it was just over. Life didn't fall apart, exactly. It just flattened out. No highs, no lows, just the steady hum of days stacking on top of each other. I started looking for jobs in other states. Nothing dramatic, just options. I told myself I needed a new challenge, something to get me out of this lull. The truth was, I couldn't walk past her house without my chest tightening. I didn't like that. I didn't like how one person could still take up so much space in a place that was supposed to be mine. I applied for work at a garage in northern Colorado. Sent in a resume to a parts supplier out in Montana. Places where I didn't know a single soul. That sounded kind of perfect. My routines changed. I started biking more, stopped drinking coffee late. I bought a plant, kept it alive. I joined a hiking group one weekend. Even flirted with someone once, a barista named Mia who asked what I was always scribbling in my notebook. We went out once. It was fine. She laughed at my jokes and told me about her favorite movies. But at the end of the night, when she reached for my hand, something in me flinched. Not on purpose. It just happened. She noticed. "You're not over someone, are you?" she asked, gently. I didn't lie. Not really. She smiled, sad. I figured. We hugged goodbye, and that was it. No second date. No hard feelings. It was better that way. The summer passed. I worked. I read. I cooked more. Some nights, I'd sit on the porch with a beer and stare out at the stars, wondering if she ever thought about it. About us. About what we almost let happen. Sometimes I'd hear Daniel's car pull into their driveway late. I'd hear their front door open, hear their dog bark once, then quiet. I never saw them together. Never heard arguing. But I never heard laughing either. One night, I had a dream where she was in my kitchen. Just standing there, barefoot, talking about nothing, about weather, recipes, where to find the best pie in town. I woke up feeling like I'd been punched in the chest. I didn't tell anyone about that either. When fall came, I decided I'd move by the end of the year. I'd saved enough. Found a small place in Fort Collins that looked promising. I didn't sign anything yet, but it felt good just knowing I could. Like I had permission to start over. That's where I thought the story ended. And then, on a Wednesday in October, it happened. I was in town, grabbing groceries. The air smelled like wood smoke and apples. The parking lot was half empty, sun low. I came out of the store and saw her standing by her car. Rachel. She looked different, tired, maybe. A little older. But her posture was the same. Straight, confident, quiet. She was loading bags into the trunk when our eyes met. She smiled. Small. Familiar. That same half-laugh curled into it. "Evan," she said. "Rachel," I replied, stepping closer. We stood there in the middle of the grocery store parking lot, like time had curled in on itself. Cars passed behind us. Someone slammed a cart into the return rack. But for a moment, it was quiet. She closed her trunk, dusted her hands on her coat. "I thought you might have moved." "I thought about it," I said. "Still might." She nodded slowly, as if that made sense. "You look well." "So do you." We both smiled, but it didn't quite reach either of us. She glanced around, then said, "Do you have a minute?" We walked toward a bench near the edge of the lot, under one of those orange-leaved trees that always makes fall feel more cinematic than it really is. She sat first, pulling her coat tighter. "I wasn't sure if I'd ever see you again," she said. "Neither was I." A long pause. "I've thought about you," she said quietly. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. She looked over at me, and I could tell that she knew I had too. "I didn't end things the right way," she said. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. "It's okay. It's not. I didn't know how to let go without hurting you. Or myself. I would have understood. I wasn't sure you would." I looked down at my hands, fingers laced together. I wanted to be angry. For a while, I was. You had every right. But I couldn't stay mad. Because it wasn't just whatever we were doing. It was something real. Even if it wasn't forever. She nodded. It was real. There was something in her voice. Not regret. Not apology. Something like acceptance. We sat there, side by side, not touching. The wind picked up. A leaf landed in her lap, and she let it stay there. "I still think about that day in the attic," she said suddenly. "You brushing dust out of your hair, sneezing like crazy." I laughed. "You made fun of me for that." "I did," she smiled. "You looked like a scared cat." We both laughed. It wasn't a loud laugh, just one of those soft, shared ones that carries more than the joke itself. Then came the quiet again. I'm not the same person I was then, she said. Neither am I. She looked at me. That's probably a good thing. I nodded. Probably. Then she reached into her bag, pulled out a small notepad and pen, scribbled something down. She handed it to me, just a phone number, no name. In case you ever want to talk. Just talk. I took it, folded it once, slipped it into my pocket. She stood first. I should go. Of course. She didn't lean in, didn't hug me, just looked at me with those same eyes that once felt like the whole world when they looked at me a certain way. Take care of yourself, Evan, she said. You too. She wished me all the best and left. And I felt my chest tighten. I don't know what it was, but I know I'll never forget it.